starting in a few minutes. Please proceed to your seats. This would be a very special event on the Global Partnerships for Sustainable Development Data. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, we hope you enjoyed your networking opportunities because we are about to start a very special event on the Global Partnerships for Sustainable Development data. So let me begin. I have an honor to introduce and invite Dr. Shamsha Tahtar to the podium to deliver her opening remarks. Let's give a round of applause to Dr. Shamsha Tahtar.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, champions, and partners for sustainable development data, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm really sorry about the delay on behalf of ESCAP and member states. Effective implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals based on strong national ownership, along with rigorous and systematic follow-up and review, using national indicators aligned with global indicators, will be the cornerstone of sustainable development success. The United Nations Statistical Commission has now agreed on a list of 230 indicators as a practical starting point for a global monitoring framework for the goals and targets of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, subject to future technical reviews and requirements. Last week, the 28-member interagency and expert group on SDG indicators, which includes 8 of our ESCAP member states, continued work on the indicators, including identifying those for which data are not readily available and for which methodological work and guidelines still need to be developed. Our region's data readiness for follow-up and review of SDGs is work in progress. We know that establishing baseline information for data-based initial reviews and future follow-up requires common, harmonized, and coordinated approaches. Given the state of baselines and the statistical capacities of countries, follow-up and review on the basis of data remains a real challenge for both developed, but more so for developing statistical systems. There is a broad consensus, however, that upfront data development is critical as it helps to set baseline national priorities, and the sooner we do that, the better it is. Asia-Pacific efforts to establish baselines have already started. For instance, we have heard during APFSD that in the Pacific, Samoa, Fiji, and Vanuatu have already assessed data availability and gaps. A sub-regional set of headline indicators compared against an earlier version matched only 60 out of the 230 global indicators. Statistical capacity building is therefore being addressed through the 10-year Pacific Statistics Strategy, and our team is very much involved in this process. The Philippines has also organized a national workshop with relevant line ministries and agencies to review the indicators and to identify priority concerns in terms of data availability. The 10-year ASEAN Community Statistical System, adopted in October 2015, recognized the need to include new and aggregate data requirements in support of regional policy making, as well as the importance of international statistical developments in areas including the SDGs. While national efforts, and I have not covered all of the national efforts, are gaining further momentum, finding solutions to data gaps calls for harnessing the data revolution to use new sources. This entails, for example, transforming data generated by GPS devices, ATMs, scanning devices, sensors, mobile phones, satellites, and social media, commonly known as big data, to produce statistics and indicators. In December last year, ESCAP convened a multi-stakeholder expert meeting. This is over and above our work with New York, that highlighted the great potential for big data to supplement official data and to enable a holistic, multidimensional review of sustainability. Despite being home to well-established statistical agencies that contribute to the UN Statistical Commission, which are driving development of SDG indicators, many statistical systems in Asia and the Pacific lack the capacity to apply methods and techniques for using big data to improve comprehensiveness and timeliness of official statistics. In 2014, the United Nations Statistical Commission created the Global Working Group on Big Data for Official Statistics to identify and address the challenges and barriers. Australia, Bangladesh, China, Indonesia, Pakistan, and the Philippines, as well as our ESCAP Statistical Institute for Asia and the Pacific, as well as ESCAP's Statistics Division, have been active members of this 27-member group. Work is underway on piloting methodologies and look into using big data for official statistics to support measures of SDG indicators, which utilize the big data sandbox in Ireland, among others. There is, however, a need to resolve issues of data access, legislation, and privacy, and to identify initiatives to improve access to proprietary data, such as big data, developing targeting training courses, and other elements that we need to work on. So, word about the ESCAP's priority on big data. ESCAP engages with statistical communities in a coordinated manner to ensure sound and consistent use of data and integration of statistics development into national SDG implementation strategies. This year, as a part of our technical cooperation work, we will be enabling, besides other things, our member states to utilize the big data sandbox to test methods and increase understanding for application of the tools to produce SDG-related indicators. SIAP's training program over the next 2 years will, among others, address both management and technical requirements for strengthening official statistics for SDGs, as well as integrating the use of big data in national statistical systems. Our approach is to work closely with member states, one, to map big data partners, institutions, capacities, and gaps within the broader data ecosystem and provide a comprehensive repository of the state of big data in the region. Two, we want to work towards identifying best practices to facilitate the scaling up, replication, and sustainability of big data programs. Three, explore development of regional guidelines on ethical and effective collection, management, dissemination, and accountability of big data. Fourth, coordinate the development of regional framework, supporting bilateral and multilateral partnerships, such as what we are going to discuss today, using big data for regional level decision making, including, for example, as relates to transboundary issues such as haze, climate change, water use, and management, migration, and disaster resilience, among others. To conclude, we should recall that SDG 17 commits to, and I quote, revitalize the global partnership for sustainable development. Hence, this event is about global partnership. With such large and growing data needs, new and traditional data producers need to work together to exploit new data sources, to elevate numeracy and statistical literacy, and to help people make better use of data and statistics. The Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data, and I'm grateful to Sanjeev for being here, as an important multi-stakeholder platform, needs to work very closely with the UN system to mobilize and coordinate the actions required to make the data revolution serve sustainable development. With more than 100 champions, which probably includes me as well. Absolutely. Now working, because I was probably one of the first ones who joined it. 100 champions now working globally to promote and develop tools and methods for capturing, managing, and efficiently processing data. The partnership is already making an invaluable contribution to our work. We have, for example, worked together to develop and test tools for a SDG data revolution roadmap toolbox to support SDG monitoring as well as real-time dynamic disaggregated data for policy making. We look forward to substantive deliberations at this special event to share some of the experience and initiatives that are taking place and to demonstrate the value of being interconnected in the manner in which the partnership envisions. I invite us all to use this opportunity to learn, to share, to establish new connections for better data to support sustainable development. I'd like to thank you, and Sanjeev, thank you for coming, and Marge, thank you for all the great work your team is doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Akhtar. Dr. Akhtar, for very insightful deliberations of the opening remarks. Dr. Akhtar is Executive Secretary of Economic and Social Commission for Asia Pacific and Under-Secretary General of United Nations. I have a pleasure now to invite Professor Sanjeev Kagram to deliver opening remarks from the podium, please. A few words to introduce Professor Kagram. Professor Sanjeev Kagram is a coordinator of the Global Partnerships for Sustainable Development Data. He has over 25 years of experience setting up multi-stakeholder initiatives. He is also currently chair and director of the John Park Jung Initiative of the Global Economy at Occidental College. The floor is yours, Mr. Kagram.
Madam Executive Secretary, Deputy Executive Director, distinguished delegates, good friends, and colleagues from all across the Asia-Pacific region. It's my honor and pleasure to spend some time with you today. I know you've had a very busy and productive last few days, and including this morning. And so I thank you very much for taking a little bit of extra time to engage in this critical conversation, not only how we monitor the SDGs, but how do we ensure that they're achieved. What we know is that 15 years ago, when we agreed on the MDGs, this did not exist. All of us now have one of these. Many of our children and our parents and our grandparents have these. We know that the world of technology has revolutionized our societies from the local level to the international level. Data is now the oil of the 21st century. That data has been put to productive use for innovation, for business development, for consumer satisfaction. What we need to do is ensure that this tremendous revolution in data production, in data accessibility, availability, capacity, is translated and harnessed to ensure that the Sustainable Development Goals and sustainable development more generally is achieved over the next 15 years. What I hope and what I believe and what the Global Partnership stands for, the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data, is that 15 years from now, no one will say we haven't marshaled all of the data, from filling data gaps to actually improving data literacy and capacity and use across government agencies, starting with official statistics, but throughout the government and throughout society, in order to ensure that data is used effectively for decision making, for policy making, for service delivery, for innovation and entrepreneurship, and for citizen empowerment and accountability. The Global Partnership is committed to this vision, and we are here to engage all of you in this collective movement to ensure that the Sustainable Development Goals and sustainable development more generally is achieved over the next 15 years, and data is at the heart of what we do, so that we can ensure to our children and grandchildren that no one is truly left behind. Let me see if I can make this work. Okay. So what is the Global Partnership? The Global Partnership is an open, independent, multi-stakeholder initiative actively engaging 100 plus champions. If you have the frequently asked questions and the short one-pager, if you look in the back of the one-pager, you'll see the list of 100 champions. The partnership effectively was launched just politically at the SDG summit in September. At that time, we had 70 members. Currently, we have over 100. In short, in just over 9 months of activity. These include governments, civil society organizations, international organizations, private sector companies, official statistics, data communities, the full range of data producers, communicators, users that need to be engaged and work together to ensure we harness the data revolution for sustainable development. The partnership's objective, as I said, is to make sure that the right data is available to the right people to make the best decisions to ensure sustainable development is achieved. What problems does the Global Partnership aim to help solve? One, to increase the demand and supply of credible, accurate, dynamic, and disaggregated data. Two, to address data gaps, poor quality, illiteracy, and inaccessibility, data illiteracy. Three, to increase the capacity to produce the effective use of data for decision-making, empowerment, accountability, and innovation. Four, to ensure that the data revolution is brought to the range of governmental and non-governmental sectors that now can use these tools and technologies in new and powerful ways. To ensure that local innovations and new technologies are shared broadly enough and scaled for maximum impact. And to ensure that the silos that separate us across different types of data communities, official statistics, administrative data, Earth observation data, geospatial data, citizen-generated data, open data, these are different and overlapping data communities, and what the partnership aims to do is to bring those together, to work collaboratively and to jointly innovate and ensure that there is accessibility to the resources, the capacity building, the innovations that will allow us to harness the data revolution for sustainable development. Again, these are the over 100 members in the Asia-Pacific region. We have several of them that will be joining us shortly to share what they're doing in terms of data for sustainable development and why the partnership is a meaningful activity for them in amplifying, leveraging, and increasing the impact of the work that they're already doing, but also to foster new collaborations and to ensure that data for sustainable development is at the very top of global, regional, and national and local political agendas. So, sorry about that, but the Global Partnership convenes connects and catalyzes. The partnership is not an operational entity and never will be. Our goal is to support the tremendous amount of work that's already happening around the world, from the local level to the international level, across societies, across sectors. Connect the dots, ensure that the sum is greater than the parts. 1 + 1 does not equal 2, but 1 + 1 = 11 for all of us. We want to connect, provide a neutral, open platform for learning, for sharing, as Dr. Akhtar said, for building new partnerships and collaborations, and catalyze, galvanize political commitments, align strategic priorities, strengthen norms, and when necessary, help to build the new norms that we need for the 21st century principles and norms, build capacities, and foster innovation. Perhaps the most important thing the partnership is attempting to do is to build trust amongst the various different statistics and data communities. There are technical, policy, and very importantly, political barriers and challenges. What we want to make sure is that the partnership helps bring those technical, policy, and political challenges to the fore and creates mechanisms for addressing them, bringing communities together, building social capital and trust. The partnership, in its short history of only less than about 9 or 10 months, it really was announced at Addis Ababa at the Financing for Development Conference in last June. We had, as said, the political launch of the partnership in September, and this at the UN summit in September, we'll have our organizational launch. In the interim phase, that launching phase, we've organized into 6 active working groups. Dr. Akhtar mentioned that our primary working group is on helping to develop and support toolboxes and tools around SDG data revolution roadmaps, how to use and harness the data revolution to strengthen statistics and data systems within countries at the national and subnational levels, and to harness that to achieve sustainable development and the sustainable development goals in particular. You'll hear from one of our most early adopters and vanguard countries, Philippines, on how they're moving this forward. Colombia, Kenya, United States, United Kingdom, and many other countries are moving in this direction, and we very much look forward to working with countries throughout the region here in the Asia Pacific, where it is so critical to harness the data revolution. A second area that I'm going to go to is on filling data gaps and working with global data collaboratives. As we know, across the 17, but particularly the 16 substantive goals of the SDGs, there are global collaboratives, health data collaboratives, climate change data collaboratives, governance data collaboratives that have organized, that are bringing stakeholders together across sectors to marshal new sources of data and increase data use. Oftentimes there is data available, it is just not made accessible. Oftentimes data is not available, and these global data collaboratives have the technical capacity, the sources of outreach to marshal new data that can fill those key gaps, not just for monitoring of the SDGs, although that's very important, and we are here, the partnership, to complement and support our esteemed colleagues in the UN Statistical Commission and Division and official statistics around the world, but data to achieve, dynamic and disaggregated data to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, to support government officials in their day-to-day decision-making on what are the policies, programs, services that will really achieve the SDGs. A third working group focuses very much on data architectures, products, and platforms. I'm sure you see that virtually every day there's a new SDG data platform being created by a governmental agency, an NGO, a private sector company. This is welcome. This innovation and competition allows for greater and new important technologies and platforms to be provided in the world. What the partnership is trying to do is help to create some mechanisms of interoperability, some alignment and harmonization across these platforms so that decision makers and citizens and other stakeholders can access the best available data as easily and as costlessly as possible in order to make better decisions. We are working also on data principles and protocols. The fundamental principles for official statistics, the International Open Data Charter, principles on digital development. There's a range of norms and principles that are absolutely essential. What the partnership, the African Data Consensus, Dr. Akhtar mentioned, the desire to create an Asian data consensus, Latin American data consensus, these are all important parts of the global architecture of norms and principles on the data revolution and official statistics and data more generally. These have to be linked, ensure that they reinforce one another, that they don't provide regulatory complexity to government officials and other stakeholders. The partnership is actively focusing on this, including the very critical and important role, principles and protocols on the sharing of privately held big data. And finally, resource alignment and mobilization. The partnership is actively encouraging there to be not only more resources dedicated to statistics and data capacity building and innovation, but that increasingly that is aligned around country roadmaps, country level priorities, needs, and strategies. So over the 9 months, we've been very busy. We are hosted by the UN Foundation for our first 3-year period through 2018. We've established an interim secretariat, which I'm currently the coordinator of. We've galvanized over 150 commitments. Every member of the partnership commits to doing something to harness the data revolution and to advance the collective work and their own work in this area. We've been fostering collaborations between different groups and members to innovate and to scale impact. We're defining core contributions for delivery in 2016. The toolbox is one of those very critical ones, but also filling critical data gaps and increasing data capacities and literacies will be part of that. We're reviewing options for inclusive governance, and currently we're recruiting an executive director. When I was asked to join and advance the Secretary General's, UN Secretary General's request to have a global partnership, one of the global partnerships so critical as part of Goal 17, I signed on for 1 day a week. Here I am working 7 days, 24 hours a day, because this, to me, is so very critical. We know that there are key gaps and bottlenecks to achieve the SDGs, policy frameworks, political will, financing and resourcing. Data is right at the very top of that. And if we don't address this particular barrier and bottleneck, we know we will come 5, 10, 15 years from now and not achieve the great possibilities that the SDG goals have provided us. So this is a perfect opportunity for stakeholders and governments from across the region to join the partnership. The partnership, as I said, is an open community, and becoming a champion means working together with many other governments, civil society organizations, international organizations, private sector companies, and data and statistics communities to advance data for sustainable development. So on the website, you can find the ways to become a member of the partnership. And we invite you not only to become a membership, but actively co-create. As I said, we're at the very early stages of this very critical initiative. The goal is for it to certainly be around for the next 15 years and continue to learn, grow, and to support country work at the national and subnational level all over the world, but certainly here in the Asia-Pacific region. As I said, you have 2 documents that hopefully provide more detail and information. And if I could say, before I bring up our colleagues to share their perspectives, who are part of the partnership, what they're doing at the local, national, and international level already to harness the data revolution. I've been working on global partnerships now for over 20 years. The first global partnership I helped set up and wrote the final report for was the World Commission on Dams back in the 1990s. The Asia-Pacific region was absolutely critical to that. One of the big issues at the World Commission on Dams is that the world had built over 45,000 large dams and spent a sum total of $2 trillion on these critical infrastructure projects, and yet the data about what was the impacts, what was the value provided by these projects was hardly existent. We've come a long way in that area, but we have to come a long way in many other areas, whether that's CRVS, poverty data, gender data, climate change data. All of the areas of the SDGs have critical gaps of data, but also critical gaps in the use of that data for effective decision making. I am sure that the global partnership can help connect, catalyze, and convene the stakeholders that are necessary and all of you to fill those gaps and to ensure that 15 years from now, we can look back and say, we used every piece of technology, every capacity we have to achieve and monitor the SDGs and achieve sustainable development more broadly. So thank you very much. I'm going to move to the wonderful setting over here and invite my colleague Amparo Bolivian and Romero from the government of Philippines, the Official Statistics Agency of the Philippines, to join me. Just in a second, we're going to show a quick video of the partnership so that you get a sense of the energy that we have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Kahram. So you've done my job. Thank you very much. So I would like to introduce Professor Kagram as a moderator of the next session. But before we go to the discussions, we have a very interesting video. And this video was commissioned by the Global Partnerships for Sustainable Development Data. It aims to introduce the purpose and aims of the partnerships for broad audience. Thank you. So you have a choice, either you go
The world is facing a crisis. It's a crisis that is hampering global efforts to solve the world's most pressing development challenges. It is a crisis of poor data. Limitations in data production, quality, access, and use are preventing progress in every area, from health to gender equality, human rights to poverty, education to energy. But change is on the way. New, robust, and powerful data ecosystems are emerging, and a data revolution is underway. The Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data is an unprecedented, independent, multi-stakeholder initiative working to harness the data revolution for sustainable development.
The Global Partnership on Sustainable Development Data is focused on making sure that the global goals, the global sustainable development goals, are realized. One of the major ways that those goals will actually have impact and change the lives of all the people of the world, and particularly the most poor and vulnerable, is by ensuring that the best and most effective use of data happens.
The more than 100 partners of the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data are joining forces to strengthen political commitment, align action, foster collaboration, spur innovation, and build trust in the booming data ecosystems of the 21st century.
We're covering the surface of this planet with sensor systems in our pockets, in the oceans, in the sky, and in space. And these can help us to provide the data that we need in order to help the monitoring and verification of the Sustainable Development Goals.
If we can't measure the choices that individuals are making and their daily preferences, and if we can't see how our systems are performing, we can't make informed decisions about how to sort of improve practices. So data really is crucial to the whole agenda.
Whatever we are doing is about people's lives, it's about our planet, it's about citizens, it's about hearts and minds, it's about knowledge, it's about enabling impact in people's lives.
The Global Partnership is open to any organization dedicated to harnessing data to achieve sustainable development. Global Partnership champions come from governments, companies, civil society organizations, international organizations, academic institutions, charities, and official statistics and data communities. Through the Global Partnership, these champions are bridging data gaps and improving data quality, access, and use.
The beauty of the data revolution and the Global Partnership, and what has really inspired our government, is the potential to, eradicate poverty, and hunger, and ensure that every Kenyan has food on the table.
Data is political. Data can be disruptive, and there's a lot of stakeholders that have interest in data. So the power of this Global Partnership on Sustainable Development Data is that we're bringing together government data with private sector data, community and citizen-generated data, with Earth observation data, and geospatial data.
The work of the Global Partnership has already begun. The Global Partnership is supporting its champions to produce data roadmaps and tools that countries need to plot their own development paths. It is convening data forums to generate political commitment and spark innovation. It is working to improve coordination, catalyze new collaborations, and it's making sure that data systems are compatible and well-funded. In short, it is creating the enabling environment needed to make data work for people and the planet.
For people working in data, you have never seen this much political attention and this much commitment from all kinds of partnerships to come together to do this. It's absolutely inspiring.
You begin to see huge potentials as we go forward. So this is the time to be alive. This is a time to work for data. This is an exciting time to live in.
It is due to the tireless work of hundreds and thousands of people that made this possible, and this partnership, this movement, will grow to 10,000s, hundreds of thousands, millions, and billions over the next 15 years.
Let's give a round of applause for very interesting and very impressive presentation and the video. So let me please invite now Professor Sanjeev Kakram to moderate the session. Dr. Shamshat Akhtar today has highlighted in her opening remarks the history, the status and priorities for ESCAP, and the partnership opportunities in using better the data among policymakers and decision makers. So now the discussion session with eminent policymakers will be led by moderator, and I would like to invite Mr. Romeo Risaid, Deputy National Statistician, Sectorial Statistics Office, Philippine Statistics Authority, and Mrs. Amparo Bavilian, lead economist, Open Government Data Working Group of World Bank. Professor Mahra.
Thank you so much. And before I begin, I want to thank again our colleagues and hosts here at UN ESCAP, Dr. Akhtar, the Deputy Executive Director, particularly Marge Guerrero, the official statistician. Our relationship with ESCAP and the regional commissions, UN regional commissions, has been so central and will continue to be a core partnership and collaboration that we want to strengthen and broaden in order to ensure that all the regions of the world are actively involved. So thank you very much to them. I want to welcome Romeo and Amparo and really get to the way to hear what's actually happening on the ground. As was mentioned by Dr. Akhtar, the government of the Philippines, the Official Statistics Agency of the Philippines, has been actively involved in thinking about and moving forward the data work and statistics works on the Sustainable Development Goals. Romeo, tell us more on why this is such a priority and how the Philippines, and particularly your agency, is leading this effort.
Test, okay. Thank you, Dr. Kagram, and of course I'd like to greet also Amparo here, and everybody. Yeah, I think I don't need to emphasize the importance of statistics in our lives. That will be like preaching to the choir. So I will go directly to the importance of statistics in the monitoring of the development agenda for beyond after 2015, which brings us to the task of monitoring the SDGs starting as soon as possible. I'd like to report very briefly that we have, in fact, in the Philippines, been gearing up for this eventual role of monitoring. Of course, the job of monitoring falls on the official statistical system, and I'd like to make a brief report that in the Philippines, from the 4 major statistical agencies before, we now have only one, which is the Philippine Statistics Authority. So from a highly decentralized system to a now more centralized system. I'd like to report that our preparations for the SDG monitoring comes from the very highly strategic to the very specific activities that our executive director started to report earlier. From the very strategic viewpoint, we have what we call the Philippine Statistical Development Plan. It is our version of a national an NSDS, and that is therefore we have an existing NSDS 2012 to 2017, but given all these changes, starting with the change in the Philippine statistical system, all the way to the adoption of the 230 or so indicators, we have to update this NSDS. And the update has already been done, and it already includes a chapter on the sustainable development goals. So very briefly, how does the SDG challenge influence the national data production and dissemination strategies in the Philippines right now? Well, first, it has provided an importance in improving the administrative data systems as possible sources for SDG indicators. We have rationalized the conduct of surveys, and we have harmonized the surveys which are sources of SDG indicators. And as I have indicated, we have included a separate chapter on SDGs in our NSDS. And more importantly, we have fostered partnership with the private sector, and we have to pursue this a little bit more aggressively, especially in the context of mining big data. And in general, raising awareness of the public to increase understanding of the SDGs. So on the more specific activities and experiences, our executive director has already indicated we had a multi-sectoral workshop, a big one, late last year, which we on the proposed SDG indicators. And we have the presentation of SDGs in various fora, academia, civil society, government agencies, local government units, and so on. We will have a series with the adoption of the 230 indicators in the last meeting of the UN Statistics Division. We are going to start our finalization of SDG indicators for the Philippines, and we are going to start that this month. And we will have a workshop on big data sometime in June. And this is an advanced advertisement. This is going to be an international workshop, and we hope that you can join. And finally, we will have the National Statistics Convention and Statistics. Every 3 years, we have a National Statistics Convention. This, you can be sure that this year, this edition of the National Statistics Convention will focus on SDG monitoring. In fact, the theme of the conference is Sustainable Development, Making Statistics Count. Now, as a statistical, in a statistical system, of course, we are the main challenges that we experience in the coming years for the implementation of the data revolution roadmaps. You have lack of financial and manpower resources. You have the need for state-of-the-art technology, the lack of technical capacity. You have to strengthen partnerships with the private sector, especially in the area of big data, and lack of high-level ministerial support, and of course, differing policies of government, and finally, addressing disaggregated indicators. Toward this end, we are going to look forward to support from the global partnership in the area of capacity building in particular for methodologies and estimating indicators, identification of relevant proxy indicators, communication strategies, improvement of administrative-based data, and harnessing registries, for instance, such as civil registry as source for data for SDG monitoring. So we have the whole thing lined up ahead of us, and We are looking forward to working closely with the private sector, the academe, other government agencies within the country and outside international partners, development partners, and the global partnership for support to make us move forward. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Amparo is the lead economist of the Open Government Data Group at the World Bank. The World Bank has been one of the central champions of the global partnership, but more generally about harnessing the data revolution. Your own work and your group's work has been so central. Why is this the time for the data revolution? And why is it so important for us to have a global partnership to bring all the stakeholders together to really achieve the goals that we have in front of us?
Thank you, Sanjeev. First of all, I wanted to thank ESCAP for organizing this meeting and the Global Partnership, of course, and for inviting me. It is a pleasure to be here. So if you take a step back and think, is this really needed? Do we really need another committee, commission, partnership working on data? And why? And if you look at the report of the independent expert panel on the data revolution titled A World That Counts, you will find the answer there. But I'll try to summarize it in a couple of sentences. The answer is yes, because there is something that this partnership does that no other group does. And that is, and I think it's more important, value added, is to bridge the gap first with the private sector. The private sector is becoming an increasingly important source of data for public good. That's something that did not happen before, and that's something that other institutional arrangements don't include. We think that that is a very important role of the partnership. Of course, as the film showed, it's a multi-stakeholder, so it's not just the private sector, it's also civil society, it's also international organizations and regional organizations, but we think that the most important value added of the partnership, and at the same time the greatest challenge of the partnership, is going to try to find business models, if you want to put it that way, for using data and having not just the data from the private sector, but also the contributions of the private sector into the big challenge of the data revolution. Let me finish by saying that, in my opinion, there are two data revolutions going on simultaneously in the world. One is the data revolution that produces what the economists termed a couple of years ago or more, the data deluge. So a lot of data that needs to be harnessed, to use the same word that was used in the film and in your presentation, for public good. The other data revolution is exactly the opposite. It's something that you also mentioned, Sanjeev, in your talk, is the data crisis. What our chief economist for Africa termed the statistical tragedy in Africa. So how come we have a data deluge and at the same time data crisis, data tragedy, data gaps, etc., etc.? Both things are correct. Both things present an opportunity for a Schumpeterian leapfrogging, in the sense that there is a lot of data that is not part of the official statistics system. And the challenge is how to integrate that data into the data landscape at the country level. We don't think at the bank that there is the official statistics versus the non-official, or the my data is better than your data. What we think is that there needs to be a collaboration and a symbiosis of data and find ways to iron out the problems that presents from a technological point of view, from a privacy point of view, this tension between privacy and public good, and the standards that are going to be used. And we think that the global partnership is very well placed to solve this thing. So it's not a replacing an institution, it is adding value to the existing global ecosystem for data, and that's the reason why we support it.
Thank you so much, Amparo. Back to you, Romeo. In your early experience, not early, sort of continuing experience, what are some of the lessons you've learned in the Philippines at the National Statistical Agency, but also more broadly, that you might want to share with some colleagues here? And what are some of the key challenges that you continue to face? You mentioned a few of them, but maybe you could give some specific examples of the lessons you've learned and some of the key challenges.
Yeah. Okay. So as we move from MDGs to SDGs, okay. The first one is the need to assess the preparedness of the statistical systems. That is, I think, very, very important because we need to make sure that the statistical capacity for both producers and users are there in order for us to. We had a difficult time as it is with MDGs, with the official list of indicators, around 60 of them. Now we have 231. So we have to make sure that the statistical agencies the official statistical systems are ready. The second one is this, having clear numerical targets. Because one of the deficiencies, I think, with the MDGs of them before was that there were some indicators which did not have clear numerical targets, just increasing or decreasing, and that makes it difficult to monitor or to report progress based on non-numerical indicators. And the third one is the need to link this agenda with an accountability framework, especially to governance and, of course, to financing, because it's going to be important that we realize the costs of monitoring. The fourth one, I think, is the need to link targets with country realities. And I think as countries translate the 230 indicators approved by the UNSD into country indicators, it's important to be able to link these targets with the realities in countries. I'll give you an example. For instance, in the MDG target, the indicator of prevalence associated with tuberculosis, the target is 0. But actually, the target within the country by the health agency is to reduce it to as low as 5 in 1,000. So there is a difference there. It was a blanket target that did not take the realities. The next one is the need to identify indicators that are policy relevant, that are not just a wish list, but those are indicators that are really important and in responding to emergency concerns. The next advice or lesson that we learned is to stick to the target of coming up with SMART indicators. What does SMART means? Specific, measurable, etc., achievable, relevant, and time-bound indicators. And the next one is something to do, especially at the country level. This is very important, about producing subnational disaggregations. I think most of the MDGs were national, but the real where it really matters is when you are able to bring those numbers into subnational or disaggregated down to subnational level. The others are important, but we can just enumerate them. quickly. I need to address issues on the availability of more frequent data for SDG monitoring, because otherwise we cannot, if we do not have frequent data, then the value of the indicators are lost. And then we explore new data sources, methods, and methodologies. With this number of indicators being adopted now, we really have to look at new sources of data. And the last one is the need to strengthen partnerships, and I think we are in the right track as far as that is concerned. Yeah, thank you.
Maybe I could ask you just one more question, Romeo, before I go back to Amparo, which is one of the technical challenges that seems to be on the horizon is how do we deal with the relationship between the structured data that official statistics agencies develop, produce, and share, disseminate, using the fundamental principles of official statistics, with the masses of unstructured but very large, not just in the private sector, but in many different ways. What's your experience in starting to bridge that gap, and how do we move that conversation forward?
Yeah, thank you. I think Amparo has started discussing that. In the case of the Philippines, the issue of official and non-official is crucial, because we have a system of designated statistics that makes it very specific when official statistics become official. Because as you know, data come from all directions, and there can be a lot of noise. And the only way we try to keep that noise down is to declare what is official and what isn't. Now, we know that the private sector, they produce a lot of data, and they want to produce data for whatever purpose. Our stand is that they will have to work with us. We'll have to work together using new paradigms in making new sources of information become part of the official statistical system. It's a new area, so we are still groping and looking for, as Amparo said, business models for making such other sources of data become part of the official statistical system. Okay.
Thank you. Amparo, going back to your vast experience and the bank's tremendous experience in this field as you're seeing the global landscape change, what are some of the most interesting sort of trends and innovations that you're seeing? Could you give the audience some examples of different countries or different technologies or methods that you think are really transforming and potentially offering new opportunities across the data cycle? We've spoken a lot about filling data gaps, but also in terms of data visualization, data use, and so forth. Where are some of the great new opportunities?
Thank you for the question. It's very interesting and gives me a platform to say a lot of the messages. If I had to summarize it, I think 4 things. One is open data. The second one is big data. The third one is a very promising area that we're just starting to work on, which is use of administrative records. And the fourth one, I would say, is a different way of doing things and doing them with different people than we're used to. So let me briefly give you some country examples as you requested. So open data first. Open data is something that gives a lot of opportunities, not just for transparency, because you could achieve that with just publishing data, but open data gives the opportunity to reuse data in very novel ways. And that leads to improvements in public services, opportunities for entrepreneurship using data, etc. They have been materializing mostly in some of the OECD countries, but there are important progresses in developing countries. We are proud to work with them and to support them. We have tools for them, the Open Readiness Assessment tool and a toolkit, and we have been supporting about 35 to 40 countries in different ways to have their own national open data programs. There are countries including in Africa. Kenya was the first one. Burkina Faso is making a lot of progress. There are countries in Asia. The Philippines has a very good open data program. There are countries in Latin America. Mexico is a very good example, Uruguay, and there are others. On big data, so let me say this about big data. Most of the sources of this data come, not all, but most of them come from the private sector, except satellite records, which in many cases come from public agencies. The private sector generates this data, but it's also using them for their own profit-making motives. I mean, they know, many private sector companies, how to use them. The challenge is how to use this data for public good. And that's where we're having a lot of problems in technical terms, although in technical terms, I think there's been a lot of progress in the past 2 years. There's still a lot of challenges, but more problems in the enabling environment. So how the data ownership issues and data access issues and privacy issues. So that's the challenge. Plus, you know, capacity building in the public sector, be it in the national statistical offices, but also in sectoral ministries to use this big data for their own objectives. In terms of administrative records, this is the beauty of administrative records, and it applies also to big data. It's data that is already collected. So a big challenge now in the statistical systems is how do you reconcile a multiplicity of demands? We're going from 60 MDG indicators to 230, and half of the MDG indicators, according to the UN statistical system, there was no data for. So we're increasing it 5 times. So how do you reconcile that with a flat resource environment? So new ways of doing things more efficiently and with different people have to be part of that answer. And the beauty of administrative records is that the data is already collected. It's a byproduct of some other administrative system. So now the challenge is the data is already collected. Thanks to e-government services and the evolution of e-government, many of these data are digitalized, not always. We still deal with paper records in many poor countries, but increasingly digitalized. So it's how to incorporate that data. And finally, sorry if it sounds repetitive, but it's very important to have a different mental model. I mean, not moving away from established statistical practices, which are extremely important, especially for decision-making processes, but harnessing all this other vast data with new standards, more standards that can be changed more quickly, more adaptively, according to the needs and the uses, and breaking the model about working just within our own silos and collaborating to start with the rest of the public sector. National statistical offices in some countries are the leaders of a national statistical system, which is a different thing. But not always. I mean, some of the experience with open data in some countries shows that whereas the objective was to share data outside the government, open data has helped to increase the connectedness within government, right? So working within government agencies, but working also with private sector, working with civil society, crowdsourcing of data, using open software, et cetera, presents large opportunities to answer this dichotomy between the increased demand and flat resource environments.
And this is exactly the types of innovations and opportunities that the partnership is trying to assemble, make more available so that organizations, countries, governments, NSOs, stakeholders around the world can get access to them and use them more effectively. We have a few minutes for questions with our panelists here. So the floor is open if you have some questions for Romeo or Amparo or to myself, and then we're going to bring up 2 other panelists who are going to speak about civil society and research perspectives on the data revolution. If there are any questions, please. And please introduce yourself.
Yes, good morning. I'm Aura Sevilla from Coalition of Services of the Elderly from the Philippines, representing the older persons constituent. Just a brief overview because Asia Pacific is aging in an unprecedented pace, and we are home to half of the world's aging population, and this is expected to be growing in the coming years exponentially. So I just wondering how this data, the existing of indicators, integrate data specifically on aging in the process. The main point of such is we're working on how to improve also how the data would be disaggregated based on age, among others, because currently what the general statistics, the main problem we have is the issues are not easily captured and quantifiable using mainstream statistics because normally what we would see is just for aging, they would see 60 plus and above. So there's no breakdown about 60 and 70 or 80 and 90. And like for an instance in indicators on health, the indicators on health, number 3.8, it was mentioned there that one of the things that we need to work is the reduction of non-communicable diseases. Non-communicable diseases particularly affects older persons, but the problem is we have a very high age gap, I mean age bracket. We only measure it 20 to the young adult, the middle adult, and the late adult. So how we could make sure that these are really age disaggregated based on our experiences.
Thank you
for the opportunity.
Absolutely. One more question and then we'll go back.
Thank you, Chair. See, I'm Parminderjeet Singh from an NGO IT for Change in India. I do hear comments on the fact that big data is going to overwhelm the traditional statistical forms, and we know that developmental, cultural, economic, political reality would be almost determined, not only measured by big data. And we also hear that big data, the digital variety, is in the hands of the private sector. And we are moving towards an uneasy situation because, as the chair said, that the data is the oil of the new economy. And obviously, that is the biggest valuable resource. And it's not that private sector is going to just keep on sharing it as it may be doing it now in initial times. It's going to be their main revenue source. For example, a telephone company may rely less on your mobile bills, but more on the fact that they have very valuable data and monetize it. That would be the central value resource. And now, therefore, whoever has the data is going to be in control of development and policy. And now, how do we really sort this out? Because the development and policy is supposed to be in the public sector's hand, and the data, which is central fuel of development and policy, is going to be in private sector, and they are going to monetize it. Be sure they are going to sell it as big a price as they can. So I would like you to comment on this, and just to give a possibly radical idea or solution is whether we should start measuring the ownership of data from its use and not its production. And if its use is public interest use, then it is in some way already socialized and it is available for public sector and for the public for free. We need to be looking at some radical solutions. This may not be the one, but we are going towards that situation, and I would like to hear the panelists' view on that.
That's great. Why don't I go to Amparo first on the two questions, disaggregation of data, particularly age, but we know disaggregation more generally, and this question about the sort of privatization of data and what that means for the public interest more generally.
Yes, thank you. So on the first question, thank you for the question to begin with, because I think that it's important to understand the needs of the users when we're making decisions about allocating resources to data production. I'm not very familiar with aging data, but here again is an example where administrative records and to some extent big data sources can help, because one of the characteristics of these new data sources is that they have a wider coverage, they have a higher frequency, and they have way better disaggregation. So I'm afraid I cannot give you a very precise answer to your very precise question, but I can point out to some of the opportunities that if you link administrative records and some sources of big data, that can come to the help in obtaining the data with the disaggregation that you needed and the frequency and coverage that you needed. The question of privatization of data is very interesting. So let me start to try to answer with this. Take a telecom company that has call detail records, which is the metadata of your phone calls. It's not the content of your call or your SMS message, but it's data about that call, or when did it start, when did it end, how long did it take, etc., etc. Now, is this data owned by the telecom company, assuming it's a private company, or is it owned by the person who made the call? Okay, that is a key issue, and that's a key issue that is being debated. So the private company would say, well, we have that data. But the government has a regulatory authority. The government can say no, right? That is, if you want to have a concession for telecom services, you have to give us the data. Now, I, as a user, as a private sector user, I say, wait a minute, that data is neither the government's nor the telecoms, it's my data. The company will say, no, but we invest the resources to get that data. And I would reply, yeah, but I pay you. And in my fees, in my tariffs, are including the resources that make you. So this is the type of discussions that are happening right now. But there are some promising answers already. And let me give you a concrete example. During the Ebola crisis in Africa, there were a lot of civil society groups, NGOs, and academics that were trying to get hold on mobile record data to respond to the crisis. And they were having difficulties, not just with the private sector companies, but also with the government agencies that were reluctant to assume these risks. And as a result of that crisis, the GMSA, which is a global consortium of open data telecom companies, have issued guidelines on the use of call detail records for these crisis situations. Now, I'm sure these guidelines are not the last word. I am absolutely sure. I can guarantee that this will change, there will be objections, but they're a place to begin. So these types of discussions are going on, and this is another beauty of the global partnership. They are going on outside the official statistics space. And so this is where the collaboration really starts to take shape.
Thank you, Amparo.
I don't have much more to add to that, except to say that it's a new area, working with the private sector in terms of bringing their the data that they produced as part of their money-making ventures into something that the government or the public sector can use for other purposes. The idea of defining ownership on the basis of use rather than on who produces it is an interesting one, and it's going to be one of those items that we will consider when we talk with the private sector. And on the first question, yes, indeed, we hear you. Of course, disaggregation is sometimes the basic data is there, but it's not disaggregated to the way that you want it, so it's not very useful. But I'll give you an example in the case of the Philippines, and specifically for the senior citizens, the old people. Poverty, for instance, poverty statistics. We have poverty statistics which you know, it just says how many people are poor. But we have poverty statistics for the basic sectors, which defines poverty incidence among women, among farmers, among fishermen, and among the elderly. And I'd like to report to you that these statistics in basic sector, this statistics on poverty of the basic sectors, was in fact made a basis for increasing the monthly pension of the elderly from the government service insurance system. So in fact, they are useful. And it's not just for the elderly, for many other sectors as well. So, like I said, we hear you, and the only way we can understand fully what your requirements are is to continue this dialogue and conversation. Yeah, thank you. So, I invite you to visit us, to our Philippine Statistics Authority. Yeah.
Yes, I'm sorry, but I would like to add one thing that a lot of starting with Dr. Akhtar's opening statement and your statement and the film and a lot of the questions, and this issue of data for monitoring. So yes, indeed, data for monitoring is important, but data for decision making is way more important. So it's not just data for monitoring thing, it's to making decisions. I need data disaggregated within the more than 60 years old bracket, and I need it to make decisions. That is something that we have a responsibility to convey that message to the people who decide resource allocations for data. It's like Jessica said in the film, it's informed decision making. That is the important thing of data.
And if I could just reinforce that, the Global Partnership's commitment is to ensure that we connect the demand for informed data decision making with the supply. So if our colleague from the Philippines or others have clear use cases of how data can be used to improve decision making, service delivery, perhaps innovation, as Amparo mentioned, entrepreneurship, what we are trying to build is an online marketplace where those can be shared and aggregated, and the suppliers, the potential ones that Amparo and Romeo mentioned, big data, citizen-generated data, academic institutions, research institutions, can respond. And it's through that innovation and then aggregation effect that we'll be able to solve these questions. This is, the questions that are being asked are exactly the questions that the partnership wants to bring out into the public and make much more accessible and to create a collaborative endeavor to address. Before I ask our next panelist and thank our current panelists, I just want to share, though, something to think about, because we have many private sector partners in the Global Partnership, and we wanted to have one or two of them here. Unfortunately, because of schedules, that was not possible. What we've started to learn that there's a continuum of possibilities that we want to think about, where there is win-win solutions, and increasingly what our colleague from India was sharing, challenges that we have to figure out. The win-win solutions have to do oftentimes with new technologies. A great example is increasingly, as Romeo will say, new technologies such as GPS, data provision, or tablets and so forth and so on, can dramatically reduce the cost of data collection. It can increase coverage and so forth. And there are many other types of technologies like that. There is certainly a cost to those. But in many ways, the benefit outweighs the cost, and there is an overall mutual benefit. There are ways in which the private sector can launch new surveys using their access to populations that's more dynamic, as Amparo was saying, that's more disaggregated, that can complement. And if in working with standards and the capacities and the technical skills of the official statistic agencies, that partnership can be strengthened, then we have access to new sources of data. There is, of course, the data that is collected always by those companies, and as our colleague from India mentioned, are used for profit-making purposes. Access to that data is very complicated. As Amparo rightfully said, there's not just two stakeholders, the companies and the government, but the private individuals who in many ways should be the primary owners of that data. The question becomes is there ways for that data to be shared in ways that protect the privacy and the authority of individuals, but also contribute to the informed data decision making that Amparo and Romeo were suggesting. This is the frontier. One of the ways that is starting to innovate is this notion of open algorithms. That companies can run algorithms on the data that they're collecting, provide that data, ensure that it's verified, their algorithms are verified, provide the results of that data to public entities. They can be checked, monitored, verified, used as complementary data, sometimes even as supplementary or replacement data. Those algorithms can be brought out to the public transparently, and other companies and statistic agencies and government agencies and stakeholders can use those algorithms. This is the beginning. We don't know if that actually will work, but this is the type of experimentation and learning we have to do collaboratively. It can't be done by just one group standing here, doing it by themselves in an isolated way. This is a global conversation and a global process, and that's why the global partnership is so critical. I guess the final thing I'd say is that the partnership has run into criticism, and rightfully so, because all partnerships should be, about whether or not we are becoming a front for the private sector. My response in doing this work after 20 years is that there are always material interests. There are the material interests of private sector companies, there's the material interest of government agencies, official status, everyone has material interests. What partnerships are good at is bringing those material interests out transparently and ensuring that there is a transparent and accountable discussion about those interests and how to manage them. What is the social license to operate of data companies in our world is an open question. But it's only through an independent multi-stakeholder initiative like the partnership that we can be effective in addressing that. We really have no other options, and that's why I implore you all to engage, because this is the conversation that we must have, and the new regulatory models of the 21st century on data will emerge as a result of it. So I want to thank Amparo and Romeo. I want to welcome our next panelists, but thank you so much. A round of applause. Thank you, dear. Pravan and Sadia, will you? Thank you. We're going to go, well, you know that we've taken a little extra time out of your schedule because of the length of the plenary session prior to this, but we'll try to close by 1 o'clock and get you out so that you can have some lunch and some time to continue your networking and discussions. We thought it was very important to bring other voices, additional voices, because the partnership, as we've discussed, is connecting the official and the non-official, governments and international regional organizations with civil society, the private sector, research institutes. I want to welcome Ms. Sadia Razek from she's the team leader and senior research associate at the Sustainable Development Policy Institute of Pakistan, where they're doing some very innovative work with official statistics and government agencies, but also with researchers, civil society organizations, and the private sector. And also Mr. Pranav Bardakaki, the founder and CEO of the Local Innovations Group in Nepal. And I want to move straight to asking them some questions. Particularly, what are your organizations trying to do to harness the data revolution for sustainable development? What are some of the lessons you're learning? And what are some of the challenges you're facing that the global partnership can be a platform to help addressing? So Sadia, may I start with you?
Okay. As the name suggests, Sustainable Development Policy Institute, so we are talking about the sustainable development since its inception in 1992. So sustainable development is not something really very new for us. Beside other things, regarding data, we have initiated a project on the open data. What we are doing is, we started with the education sector, and then we have also included the nutrition. We are collecting all the data sets, whether they are generating by the government institutions or by the private organizations or by the other think tanks or by the international or UN agencies. We used to collect all that data sets, put it in a machine readable, downloadable format, and put it on website. So no login is required. You can go to our website, you can download the data, you can use that data. And we are also in a phase of transforming our web portal to improve the visualizations. So within next week or so, we will be switching to our new portal, and you can develop 10 different forms of graphs out of that data. You can be able to do the online analysis. There would be a dynamic query questions that if you want to have the information on, let's say, net enrollment rate, which has been collected by different organizations, by different reports, by different data sets, you will just put that entry and you will have all the information from different data sets and from different years, and then you will be able to compare. And then we will have the map section. There you can find the category map as well as the specialized match. We will have the double layer of the information. In addition to that, so supporting that data related activities, we also used to do some kind of analysis, blogs, and other things which are available on our website, the news bulletins and things on. Why this is important? Because if we talk about the MDGs, why we fail MDGs, among others, one of the most important reason was the lack of the data, which result in the lack of MNE, and which also affect our evidence-based policy making. Because if you really want to move forward for the development, the evidence-based policy making is really important. If you don't know how many are out of school, how many are below the poverty line, how many people do not have the access to the safe drinking water, then how you would be able to make the policy for them. So the first and most important thing is to have the data, to have the evidence-based policy making, and then for the planning purposes as the provincial level, sub-provincial, district level, and up to the sub-district level. And then you can use that data for the monitoring and evaluation. So I think that is the most important thing, to have the data for attaining the SDGs. So we are committed to move towards the attainment of SDGs in Pakistan, and that is one of the things which we are doing at the SDPI. The challenges are some of the data sets are not at the required format, some are not at the required level of disaggregation, and most importantly, sometimes there is the issue of definitions and nomenclatures. And then there is another challenge is that is the privacy and other issues. So we don't have the access to the microdata. And sometimes the data is available, but the custodian of the data are reluctant to share that data. So these are the challenges we are facing, but within just past 1 year, we tried our best, and now we have established the contacts with different data producers, and we also used to conduct the seminars on the data related issues, where idea is to bring the policy makers, data producers, as well as the data users, so we can come up with the solutions as well. So these are the things.
That's great. Pranav, you're running an initiative in Nepal that's part of a broader cross-country initiative of the data shift, which is being organized by Civicus, the International Civil Society Network. Tell us more about the data shift in particular and how you're trying to advance it in Nepal. And some of the questions that always get asked is why should civil society, citizens, be not only a source of data, but users of data to achieve the SDGs?
Thanks, Sanjay. Good afternoon, all. I mean, I've never had so many people looking at me before. I run a non-profit called Local Interventions Group in Nepal. And we are the producers of data, we are the users of data, and we are the advocates of data as well, including open data. We've been at it for the last 2.5 years. The data shift project that Sanjeev just mentioned, it's a research initiative looking at the impact of citizen-generated data in Nepal, Tanzania, Kenya, and Argentina. So we've just wrapped up the research. Report is coming out should be out in a couple of weeks. The initiatives, let me go back to the initiatives that we've done in the last 3 years as users and producers of data. The first thing that we did with data was using crowdsourcing technology, Ushahidi, to generate data on grievances of citizens in Nepal. Grievances relating to misuse of funds, social security benefits. I mean, elderly is not getting social security benefits, absenteeism of local officials at the various level, things like that. I mean, it started off as quite a confrontational project, but we sat down with the government officials and said, listen, we're not going to make it open. We'll share the data with you before we make it open. And we will anonymize all the data so that no one will be blaming anyone there. So it was a 6-month pilot, and we sat down with the government agencies later, and the guys looked at it, Ministry of Federal Affairs and Local Development, they looked at it and they're like, oh, okay, this is something that we never had before. It was properly geo-coded, GIS mapped on Ushahidi. This would actually help us. We want to know, when we send out our VDC officials, local duty bearers to the post of the last mile, we want to know whether they have turned up at their offices, whether they have dispensed their services. And we sat down with the government, and they looked at the data that we produced. We didn't share it with anyone. And later we anonymized the data and shared it on open platform as CSV and XML and all that. So government started listening to that. And our learning based on that was, okay, if you don't go to government with a confrontational attitude and sort of attitude to work together, it actually works. It might be something useful to them as well, even though the data generated is not necessarily from their own sources. Another initiative, we launched a mobile app for Nepal Police, what has been the first mobile app for any government agency in the country. It's called Hamro Police. Hamro literally means our. So our police. So mobile app for citizens, to enable citizens to send pictorial and documentary evidence relating to incidents in their area. So Nepal Police took total control of it, ownership of it, let's put it that way. We helped them set that up. And now the data that has been generated through the mobile app, it's considered as an official data. I mean, they're creating hotspots. They're trying to identify who the champions are within the communities, who keeps sending the messages and all that, who are the users of the mobile app and all that as well. So what we're trying to do with those sort of initiatives is sort of blur the lines between the civil society and the government when it comes to using data and all that. So the lesson again has been collaborate with the government, then your half of a headache is gone, and then your impact is sort of guaranteed as well. Coming back to the data shift. So those sort of data generated initiatives, we wanted to understand better this emerging impact of data, whether it's citizen generated data, open data, big data, geospatial, all of that. How does it actually play out? What sort of impact is it having at the grassroots level, as well as the policy level, as well as civil society and all that? And the open data thing is such a disarming thing for everyone in Nepal. I mean, it doesn't really hurt anyone. It doesn't really have to be that controversial. For example, like human rights. During the conflict period, if you talked about human rights, you'd blip on Nepal Army's radar quite strongly. You'd blip. I mean, I have been on the list as well. So open data, talking about data, no one really bothers. Oh, all right, okay, these guys are doing this thing. Let's see what they have to say. So for the last 2 years, we've been constantly talking about open data and all that. Now the government is starting to pin their ears back. Civil society is starting to pin their ears back as well. The telcos, telecom operators as well. All right, okay. I mean, this is not that telcos are saying, okay, this is not something that we'll be losing our sleep or the revenue over, so we'll collaborate with you. So the only challenges so far has been the existing mechanisms and the data platforms. It's not like government is just waking up to the open data and the big data and citizen-generated data. They already have the existing mechanisms to manage data from all sources, whatever that is. So when civil society organizations like us create new data sets, and we go to the government agencies, all right, okay, this is the data sets that we have created. What are you going to do about that? They want to do something about that, but they don't always have the ways or the means or the capacity or the technical expertise to use them in a proper way. I think that answers your question, Sanjeev?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks.
Sadia, coming back to you, what have been some of the benefits of the multi-stakeholder interactions that you all have been engaging in? And what have been some of the main challenge in those multi-stakeholder interactions?
I think the most important thing is the learning from each other. Because there are the very good things, or you can say the best practices private sector is doing. Some of the best things are done by the government sector or by the other civil society organizations. So it's always good to learn from each other. And as I mentioned that we want to we have this Pakistan Data Portal, which is the Open Data Initiative. We want to expand it for the SDGs. If not for all 17 goals, but at least for the social sector, and we want to expand it for the at the regional level as well, at least for the South Asian level, so that we can compare with each other. So in that sense as well, it is really important to talk with each other, to discuss with each other, to see that what are the different kind of innovations others are working, how we can deal with them. But challenges are sometimes that you have to get the information and data. Some people are reluctant due to the privacy issues. Then there is a issue to reach them. So I think this is the challenge, but it can be overcome.
Let me ask you one other question. Could you give some examples where you've had some particular challenges with either particular government agencies or private sector companies or even citizens, where you've been able to reconcile, deal with them, and how has that happened? Give some examples to make it very concrete.
Okay, because I mentioned we are working with the education sector. Most of the data on our portal is from the education sector. So we are not only engaged with the Pakistan Bureau of Statistics, but as well as the APM, that is the Committee for Education Planning and Management, who have the MIS on education. So they have all the data sets. But then initially we had some issues with them for the timely disbursement of the data, so we were not able to get the data, and then we have developed some linkages with them to get that data. Then there were some issues with the data that the figures are not being reconciled or some other issues. And now we are at very good terms to get all that information because now we talk to each other. We discuss these things. And just a month before we had a seminar just on the issues of the data they are being produced. And they were very happy to come to our office and discuss the issues they have in their data. So I think that is kind of an achievement, that they are ready to listen, they are ready to cooperate, and they are ready to collaborate and facilitate us.
Great. Perhaps one of the criticisms we often face or hear about civil society is it's amazing when civil society generates data, like the ones you were mentioning, the data sets. But civil society comes and goes. How can public officials, governments, others come to rely on this data when it may not be around because the NGO no longer exists or that data? So how do we think about the sort of institutionalization and the longer term sort of sustainability of the data that civil society might generate, which is so useful but may not last? People are concerned about that.
Absolutely. Thanks for asking that question. I mean, very important, very to the point, and something I wanted to answer as well. Sustainability of the NGOs. I mean, of course, NGOs will come and go. I mean, the owners change, especially in a country like Nepal. We have 42,000 active NGOs. I don't know what the hell we are all doing, but 42,000, come on. I mean, we can replace the government. But our lessons have been collaborate with the government right from the start. Dialogue with them, reason with them, argue with them. Now, for example, I'll just give you an example. Immediately after the earthquake last year, within 24 hours of the first quake, I sat down with a lot of senior government officials and I argued for an hour with the Secretary of Information and Communications to give us access to their hotline. The government had set up a hotline, 1234, and I wanted to access that. I wanted to see the data. Who are the people calling? What are they saying? What are their grievances? And if someone comes across this name, Sunil Malla, who used to be the secretary, I mean, amazing guy. So he wanted us to convince him. So I argued with him for an hour, and then I'm like, okay, fine, go ahead. Without any policy frameworks, anything at all. So what we did was, we looked at the data, we created a GIS map for them, and we had to this day, we have a very deep understanding how it affected the local population. I mean, deaths and injuries and the households damaged and all that. Of course, you can look it up on the internet and everyone can see that. But the granular level details and the grievances of the citizens, we have that understanding because we had access to data. Why we have that? When a lot of agencies, international agencies as well as the local agencies, when they are scurrying around to try to provide immediate relief and doing things on their own, I spent all my time sitting down with the government agencies trying to convince them. We have to work together. There's no alternative to that. And there was someone else from the Office of the Prime Minister. And he was like, you are the first non-profit company who has come to us and said, okay, let's work together on this. Otherwise, everyone is doing things on their own. So who are the government? Government guys are people like us. They want to pin their ears back. They want to listen if you have bold new ideas that will just rock the boat a little bit, but not kind of make them, push them into uncomfortable situations. So sustainability of data generation and all that, its long-term impact and all that. Start collaborating with the government right from the start. It will bear something. Of course, it's challenging out in the third world to work closely with the government, but there is a way. Second, I'm very, very hopeful of global partnership. What it does is, for organizations like us, who are out there at the coal face, where we should be, of course. It sort of allows us to punch above our weight. Another example that I'll give you, the monthly perception surveys after the earthquake that we're doing it in partnership with UNOCHA. And one of our district officials, one of our district colleagues, got into a row with a local district official. And I got a call from the local district official. And we said, we're working with UNOCHA on this. And we have had lots of meetings with the Home Ministry here at the central level, as well as the Office of the Prime Minister and all that. So what it does is, oh, you're working with UNOCHA. Okay, that means, Local Interventions Group, a new non-profit company, has some credibility because you are tied up to UNOCHA. So this is what GPSDD does to us as well. It kind of helps us punch above our weight, leverage that international sort of linkages so that we can work with better impact back in the country. So two things, I think. Partnerships like this and collaboration with the government right from the start would be the answer to the
Great. Thank you so much, Farhan.
Thanks.
I want to open up and see if there's some questions for our great... Yes, please.
Thank
Could
you very
introduce
much,
yourself? Yeah.
Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I'm Maimuna Muhammad Sharif, and I'm Mayor of Seberang Perai, Penang, Malaysia. I'm from the local authority. Yeah, in local authority, we produce data directly. We also produce data indirectly due to the result of our decision, our project, our intervention, and also we are also part of the data. And earlier we heard about the smart indicators and smart data, which is available, achievable, reliable, and implementable. And in order to collect a smart data, achievable data, I think we have to get a smart people in the local authority because data is abundant in the local authority. So what I'm going to do is what is the, maybe you can share with us the capacity building at the local authority because there are, as I mentioned, abundant of data and we have a lot of information and how we can turn this information into statistic and data in making helping us to make a decision and in day-to-day, like age disaggregated data, sex disaggregated data, on gender mainstreaming, so that another thing is this data can be sustained. Sustainability of data collection is not one-off, so that we can have the sustainability. So I would like to find out how we can help the local authorities in terms of the capacity building or maybe from the panelists' experience in their own local authorities or countries, maybe there is any framework or tools or that we can share in the best practices. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Any other questions from our audience? Please.
Yes, my name is Kareem Dredd. I'm from the U.S. Embassy here in Bangkok. First of all, I wanted to thank you all for your presentation. This is a very rich discussion for us. The United States is a proud member of ESCAP, and we're honored to join ESCAP, several governments, including the government of the Philippines, and also 100 other organizations as founding partners of the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Goals. Harnessing the data revolution for sustainable development is a top priority of the United States, both at home and around the world, as we know that data for statistics for monitoring the global goals is critical. Additionally, we see the cutting-edge opportunities to harness the data revolution to generate real-time, dynamic, and disaggregated data for action, for program optimization, and mutual accountability. My question is, as we're all aware, the global goals have 17 goals, 169 targets, 231 initial indicators. How can ESCAP and the partnership and other regional stakeholders support country-level efforts to determine a baseline on where they are towards achieving these goals?
Thank you so much. One more question, please.
Yeah, thank you very much for time. I'm Parshuram Upadhyay. I'm from Nepal. I work with the local authorities as well. I totally agree that the previous Madam Mayor already put here, but I want to again question again to from panelists to clarify on some of the issues. From governance perspective, yes, we totally agree that the data has great importance in planning, decision making, and monitoring itself. But you see, who shoulder regarding to the achieving sustainability SDGs, who shoulder the responsibility? We believe that in our part in the globe, that local authorities, they have to shoulder many. So if you see from that perspective, when they're supposed to take the birth registration till the death registration, many things we people access to our doorstep government. So this is the biggest question and ours to our government, that why not you think, and the private sector also, why not we think, so we capacitate our community and the closest government of the community, local government, so that the data are good, owned, and those can be utilized in many purposes. Thank you.
Great. One more question, please.
Yeah, my name is Jack Sim. I'm both the founder of the World Toilet Organization and also the BOP hub for the base of the pyramid. I find these two panels are very, very exciting because with your data, somebody have to downstream your data to use it. And the BOP hub is set up in Singapore. Singapore turned from third world to first world in 25 years pre-internet without donation. It was to unlock the people's spirit of enterprise and the good work ethics. Today, with the internet, with all your data collected, we are able then to transform that into demand drivers. That means these are the needs, these are the lacking. The problem are basically opportunity for businesses. And if we can hybrid the multinational, the local companies, the small medium enterprise and the nano enterprise, and marry it together with financing, training, investment, and distribution network together, I think this data can be very, very interesting. And I really like to work with you on this. I've already submit my membership on your website.
Thank you so much. We're already a success. Why don't I pass it back to Sadia? You can answer any of the questions that make, and particularly the ones I thought on the local government capacity building were
okay, regarding the sustainability, I would say it's really important to institutionalize that thing. That data collection or that activity should be embedded in the system. What I have seen and experienced, observed in Pakistan especially, that whenever the government wants to do something, okay, we need to have the data, do some kind of short survey, and that's it. And then obviously it's not sustained, it won't happen again. And sometimes in case of donor-funded projects, as long as the funding is there, they are collecting the data or the project is there. As soon as the funding is closed, they are no more there. So the most important thing is to embed in the system, make it part of the budget, even some donor is funding it, but it should be part of the government budget so that it can be sustained. If it is not part of your government system or it is not institutionalized, then obviously it would be on the off and on and haphazard basis. So for the sustainability, that is one important thing. And regarding this civil registration, what we are doing in Pakistan, that the Union Council level, which is the community level, they have provided the computers, the data from the National Data Administration Authority, that is NADA, who have all the information on the ID cards and the population related information. So whenever a person goes there, they can match the ID card number and do the things, and then they can issue the birth registration or death registration and all these things. So now it is very much institutionalized, and because the system is computerized, before that it was manual, so taking a lot of time. Now because it is computerized, system is there, so it takes less time. So I think these kind of things can be done.
Yes, I'll take two questions. One from the representative of the US government. Sorry. All right.
From the US government.
From the.
Thank you.
Sure. Your question regarding what can the US government do regarding developing the capacity of the local actors and developing the baseline and all that. Last year, US State Department in collaboration with Humanity United conducted a hackathon in Kathmandu. And we're part of that as well. We wanted to see the technology solutions regarding human trafficking from Nepal, outbound human trafficking from Nepal, migration issues around that. And the hackathon, 3 days long hackathon in Kathmandu, one idea was selected from one of the companies, and US State Department chipped in the resources. They are developing the technology platform for that, and us as a policy advocacy and non-profit organization will be adopting that and plugging into the government to work together with that, with the government agency. So to an extent, your government is already doing a commendable job in Nepal. I think that was but so far, that was the only initiative that I've come across and have known. A lot needs to be done, especially for a government that has the resources and the technical expertise and the capacity to rally around a lot of representatives, both from the civil society and the government agencies as well. So thanks for that. And another question that I'll take, Mr. Upadhyay from Nepal, I guess, I'm assuming. I think the burden sharing your question revolves around burden sharing. Absolutely, I totally agree with you. I mean, it doesn't always have to be the government's work to ensure that the services are rendered to the citizens at the last mile. Civil society organizations like us, we are equally to blame, we are equally to take the responsibility, and we should be working together with the government agencies on that. And to an extent, we have already started doing that as well. But absolutely, the burden sharing should be not just the government side. It has to come from the private sector as well as the civil society organizations as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You have one more, sure?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that regarding the support to the countries or the members, I think now one important thing is the indicators. If we have the 230 indicators, then there would not be data available for all of the indicators. Maybe for some of the indicators, we need to use the proxy indicators and so on. So this is the area where we need the capacity building, and I think this is the area where the partnership and the other organizations can help us.
Absolutely. Maybe three just final thoughts. One to our colleague from Singapore, or and go to Amparo if she has a final thought. We absolutely agree. While we want to make a primary focus dynamic data for decision making and improved policy, data for innovation and entrepreneurship at the bottom of the pyramid is absolutely essential. And we actually are seeing so much more across Asia and across the world of when data is open, government data is made more open, as Amparo talked about, but also when privately held data is shared in certain ways that protects privacy, where new businesses, new enterprises, entrepreneurs can create new, whether for-profit or non-profit or social enterprise models that can really add value across the supply chain. So we completely support that, and a big part of the partnership is strengthening not only the relationship between existing private sector companies, but fostering a more healthy ecosystem of enterprises that use data of various different kinds and making that data more available. With respect to our colleague from the US government, like the Philippines, Colombia, Mexico, and many others, Kenya, I can list, have been such an essential pillar for the global partnership. What the US is doing in Nepal and many other countries around the world is very much at the cutting edge. The question about baselines, I think, is very critical, and I think two answers. What the partnership is trying to do is learn and support what's being the lessons that are being derived by experiences like in the Philippines. We heard from Dr. Akhtar that Macau and a few other countries in Asia just announced that they've completed their baselines. How those baselines were completed, what percentage of the indicators and the data sets are available, where are the main critical data gaps, and then connecting those to those global data collaboratives that we spoke about, so that some of those proxy indicators can be shared, some different sources of data can be provided, and so forth. That's absolutely critical, and that work, now that we just had the meeting last week in Mexico, where they just defined the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 indicators and data sets, we have a better sense of where those gaps are. But learning from the experiences, but also what we talked about, the SDG Data Revolution Roadmap toolboxes will very much focus on how to develop a good baseline, what are experiences from around the world, how to use local capacity, but also international partners to develop those baselines, but also to continue to advance them. So this is the work that the partnership continues to want to do. I'm going to pass it over to Amparo before we close up, and any final questions or comments. Amparo?
Thank you, Sanjeev, and apologies for monopolizing the microphone too much, but I do want to refer to the question from both Malaysia and the US Embassy. On the Malaysia, I'll talk to you afterwards. We've done work several years ago with a subnational state in Mexico, and we developed a tool specifically to take advantage of administrative records in the subnational government for decision-making and planning purposes. And to the U.S. point on baselines, and baselines have been mentioned frequently today. If you're talking about assessing a gap, you need 2 points of reference, not just one, right? If I want to say, what's the gap between me and Sanjeev, it's about 10 meters, but you have 2 points of reference. If you want to know what is the budget gap, you have to have revenues and expenditures. So to assess data gaps, you need baselines, but you also need a second reference point. And I want to mention that in the toolkit that was developed by the partnership, there is this second reference point already, and we were very happy to collaborate with the partnership on this. So is this household survey okay or not, vis-a-vis what? Is the frequency of the census in Pakistan enough, vis-a-vis what? So this other reference point has already been developed, and it's in the partnership's website, and I hope that it's a tool that can be used by most of you. Thank you.
Just to say one more word about the toolbox. The idea of the toolbox is for it to be a living online resource that continues to build different modules, that brings in the tool that Amparo was mentioning, that the bank was so helpful in helping to create, but also many other tools, the ADAPT tool that Paris 21, that is supporting the capacity building of official statistics agencies, that the Philippines is now testing in its country, or the Open Data Toolkit that Amparo mentioned of the World Bank, but many other tools. What the partnership is able to do is, unlike any other initiative, and this is another value add, is to assemble those different tools, put them together into modules, allow for countries and subnational units like in Malaysia, Nepal, and other places to then adapt that toolbox to your own circumstances. So it's a sort of one-stop shop, but it's not a rigid exercise, and it will continue to grow as new needs and demands are, how do we engage, we want to definitely have a toolbox on how to engage citizen-generated data that's coming out, how do we engage think tanks in the private sector. Each of these modules will provide part of the map, the roadmap, that countries and subnational governments can work with other stakeholders to develop and implement over time. So this is really where we want to go. We're past the 1 o'clock. I want to say thank you. We are so grateful again to Marge and our colleagues, Marco, the whole team at ESCAP for hosting us. Thank you all for staying past the lunch hour. I hope that this was valuable and interesting. The questions you are asking, there are not easy answers for. Part of why the partnership was created is to help create a much more efficient and effective and enduring platform to ask those questions broadly and to create collaborations to address them in a dynamic way over time. Thank you all very much, and please do engage and join in the partnership. And thanks to our panelists, please.